hope I pronounce it correctly, who has double affiliation Sorbonne Université in Paris, which was University of Sorbonne 4, Paris 4, and the University of Oxford. And Professor Ruggiu is specialist on the history of the family, but also on structures of Ancien Régime. And he's here in his capacity that we appreciate the most, is his work on écrits du fort privé, which is egodocumental sources or sources of personal nature. And I always say that Professor Ruggiu is the French counterpart of Rudolf Decker. He has worked on, in some ways, he's worked on different projects in relation to those personal writings, and today we will hear his vision of how personal writings are connected to the private domain. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot. I would like to start with thanking Michael and Joanne for this fantastic conference. It's really a great pleasure to be with you. So, as we know, the study of personal writings is deeply linked to topics studied by such prestigious researchers as Norbert Elias, Jürgen Habermas, Charles Taylor, or Reinhard Koselleck. As such, of the process of civilization, the emergence of the self, and the formation of private sphere, or the birth of intimacy. Analyzed by historians, but also by philosophers and literary scholars, these themes are often merged in a grand narrative that tell us of the gradual rise within the Western civilization of a space, either social, physical, or metaphorical, specific to the individual. The research group that studied during the 10,000 the French personal writings from the end of the Middle Ages to the First World War was part of this perspective, which was deeply linked to Philippe Ariès and Georges Duby's Histoire de la vie privée. And if the question mark that closed the title of our first collective book, Au plus près du secret des cœurs, signal an hesitation about the ability of the researchers to approach the secret of the heart, they did not doubt that it was worth to use diaries, journals, autobiographies, memoirs, and correspondence for attempting it. Almost 20 years later, I am not anymore so sure that this try could have succeeded, but I remain convinced that personal writings must play an essential role in our knowledge of its history for two main reasons. Personal writings were tools used by early modern men and women for working on themselves, as well as for recording information, and there are a place where historians can observe the interplays between the thoughts and practices of ordinary men and less often ordinary women, and the ocean of behavioral advices, counsels, and prescriptions which were disseminated through publications by a very wide range of clerics, moralists, lawyers, playwrights, or poets. So in this communication, I shall focus on the intimacy side of this history, addressing the issue of privacy at the end of my demonstration. And I shall use a distinction between the ethic vocabulary, which refers to the concept of researchers, and the emic vocabulary, which refers to the notion used by contemporaries. So I think that we need to do a genealogy of the words intime, intimité, intimement, like in the work of Véronique Montémont, dans la jungle de l'intime, enquête lexicographique, or in the work from Hélène Merlin, Kajman, privé en particulier, in the book, the collective book directed by Michael and other scholars. Usually there are two common ways in the historiography to approach intimacy. The first one is to stick with just one meaning of the word, the meaning which derivates from a Latin word, intimus, which designates what is most interior. So intus is inside, within. And you can read in the historiography that intimacy, intimate, is what belongs to the individual as his own secret. A story of the intimate is a story of the unspeakable. It's an investigation on the side of the buried, of the secret. So this is a very common sense, but authors are then confronted with the difficult task to explain the paradox that this secret dimension of the man and woman can be revealed, nevertheless, through writings and even through a publication. And these studies often used a diachronic perspective, which is fascinating and tricky, because you can read phrases like this one on the screen. The fact seems certain, the 18th century invented the intimate. Or, undoubtedly, the 19th century was a century of intimacy. So we have to adjust with this kind of contradictory position. The other way is to assign intimacy to a series of themes. These themes are linked to a certain category of sources, which are sometimes clarified as source de l'intime. So I think that this approach is better suited for the notion of privacy, which is better known, as Michael Paper yesterday on the different presentation demonstrated. You have to refer to Madeleine Foisil in her seminal paper in the Histoire de la vie privée. She linked privacy with family relationships, space occupation, on the body, illnesses, and sexualities. I think that a lot of things have been done on privacy by literary scholars, philosophers, art historian of literature, architecture, space, sensibility, emotion, and so forth. We know, I think, pretty well know that privacy is not a state, it's a kind of boundary that the individual moves for delimiting his own space, and that the law helped to reinforce starting from the 19th century. And I think that we need to disentangle privacy and intimacy. Intimacy is not yet a so robust concept than privacy, and I think that we have to progress by detaching ourselves from this approach by topics and to come back to the definition of the word. So I put on the screen some definitions, starting with the dictionary of the French Academy. At the end of the 17th century, intimate, intime, little use, except in the phrase ami intime. So intimacy is something in relation to friendship. If we skip to the end of the 18th century, 1788 is the fourth edition, you have still the idea of friendship, but a new meaning appears. It's persuasion intérieure et profonde, the intimate feeling of the conscience. So closeness was the essence of the first meaning, and now a new characteristic was added, which is inwardness, something internal. In the 19th century, the meanings are quite stabilized, and the interior sense of the word is still emphasized with the idea of secret. Ce qu'il y a de plus intime, ce qu'il y a de plus caché, the most intimate and hidden things in a person. So researchers generally express surprise, confront to this quick, just 1 century, and deep evolution in the use of the word. But there is a common point between these meanings. Intime is a quality that characterizes a relationship. And this relation is marked by a deepness that other form of relation cannot match. So I would like to go beyond this observation by exploring the idea that this deepness came from knowledge, and that at the end of the day, intimacy is knowledge. So the first part of my paper, the first section of my paper, will show that the intimate nature of a friendship relationship at the turn of the 17th century and 18th century was founded on the free communication of information between friends. They shared news on their activities, but they share above all their feelings, beliefs, emotions. Secondly, I shall examine how this knowledge of other has changed the way the knowledge of oneself has evolved during the early modern period. Focusing on diaries written by members of the provincial nobility or clergy during the 17th and 18th century, I shall study how these writings became a tool for an intimate self-knowledge. And in the last section of my paper, if I have time, I will focus on the modalities of knowledge of a significant other, who is none than the husband of wife. So, intimacy and knowledge of other. I will be brief because I think it's already well known. Intimacy is a quality that defines a form of friendship in the early modern time. This intimacy extends over time and show a particular intensity. But I shall emphasize here on the third dimension, which is the circulation of information. I'm sorry, I am well known in France because I put too much things on my PowerPoint, so it's quite easy. Sorry. So my first example is Louis de Rouvroy, Duc de Saint-Simon, the author of well-known memoir. In his work, intimate is very frequently used to describe a friendship between two people, like, for example, the author on the ministère Michel Chamillard. So, mon intime liaison avec Chamillard, qui me demande instamment mon amitié. And as you can read, this friendship is based on frankness. And this friendship initiates Saint-Simon into many important things. So through the friendship, a lot of information circulated. So in this excerpt, you can find duration, depth, close union, and this initiate with the word initiate this circulation of information. And it's the same thing with in another excerpt of the memoir, an exchange between Saint-Simon and the wife of Chamillard, Elisabeth Thérèse Le Rebourg. You can see the context is quite complicated. They are speaking of the marriage of the daughter of Chamillard. Again, Saint-Simon put forward the frankness, the franchise between the two friends, and this frankness sealed our friendship on our intimate relation entirely. So it's really the meaning of the word by Furtière. What is a confidant? A confidant is a close friend to whom you can confide all your secrets. So I have a lot of example. The Bishop Pierre Daniel Huet is speaking about the friendship he had with Gilles Ménage, seulement mon ami depuis ma jeunesse. Donc il était non seulement mon ami depuis ma jeunesse, but my most intimate friend. And you can see the original is in Latin. Qui etiam nun pubescens, non familiaritate solum, sed intima etiam amicitiam. And with this friend, he can consult him, he send him his paper, so giving a contribution is something very intimate, and is the man to whom I could frankly open my heart, and this word is very, very important. We can find the same expression in the correspondence between the Marquise de Sévigné and Roger de Rabutin, Bussy Rabutin. The Marquise had been ill, and Bussy Rabutin wrote her, que ferais-je au monde sans vous, ma pauvre chère cousine, and to whom may I speak with an open heart. It's exactly the same expression. So I think that the point is clear. Intimacy is exchanges. It is knowledge of the other, of its work, of its news, of its heart. And this knowledge happens through conversation, either real conversation, oral conversation, or written conversation through correspondence, but also through imaginary conversation. And I would like just pinpoint this particularly kind of conversation at the end of the 18th century. The famous author like Voltaire, Rousseau, Franklin, or Bernardin de Saint-Pierre, you know Paul and Virginie, began to receive letters from admirers. And in these admirers, in these letters, the writers express all the reading of the works change their understanding of themselves. So they had a conversation, an imaginary conversation with the work. The letters goes on. The letter go on. We begin to read Paul and Virginie, and that was a revelation. I am Paul, or I am Virginie. What the heroes experience are my feelings, my aspiration, my emotion. So reading the work give them allegedly a better understanding of themselves, a better self-knowledge. So I can now move to the second part of my presentation, intimacy as self-knowledge. So at the end of the 18th century, this new meaning of intimacy as interiority are appearing in the dictionary. You can see it, so in the dictionary of the Académie Française, but also in the 1771 edition of the Dictionnaire de Trévoux, which is a Jesuit enterprise. So, intimacy, sentiment intérieur ou conscience. En dictionnaire de l'Académie française, it's the same thing. Sentiment intime de la conscience. So, we have to understand how we have moved in less than a century from a quite constrained, restricted sense of the word, a close friendship, to a sense which evokes interiority and an inner consciousness which embodies this interiority. I think that studying the early modern diaries could be a good way to understand this move. So my analysis owes much to the study by an American historian called Kenneth Lockridge of the diary of a gentleman from Virginia, William Byrd. William Byrd wrote a diary characterized by the regular repetition of the same routines. So this diary has no or almost no reflective passages. So you can think that there is no self in this diary. But it's very interesting that Kenneth Lockridge allow us to discern the self beneath the apparent neutrality of the notation. So Byrd just notes every day the same succession of action: sunrise, prayers, physical exercise, reading, aristocratic sociability. It's ever the same. But for Lockridge, these routine activities reflect the fact that Byrd was reproducing the sociability of the British gentleman. As a landlord from the periphery of the English world, of the strange land of America, he feels necessary to apply himself to appear as a British gentleman, doing what exactly the British gentlemen were doing. So Byrd made his diary the mirror of the imaginary existence of a perfect gentleman. So we can see in the diary the activities, practices of Byrd, as well as his anxiety and as well as his inner feeling. So I have a lot of examples of French personal writings who are written exactly in the same way. Just one example: Jean-Baptiste, because it's a very gripping example. Jean-Baptiste Gris d'Estoublon is the younger son of a Provençal family, and he kept an account book. So it's an account book, but this account book is interspersed with family notation. Jean-Baptiste spent his whole life in the financial, social, and emotional dependence on his eldest brother, because his brother has a family fortune. So his account books is woven with two sets of parallel remarks: complaints about his poverty and declaration of loyalty towards his elder brother. And I put an example on screen. So what is very striking with Gris is his anxiety, his social discomfort, which came from his inner feelings, and he tries to conform to what is waited from a younger brother: loyalty and dependency on his brother. So, as shown by this example, self-reflection until the second half of the 18th century was largely an exercise in conformity of the self to the world. But this self-reflection was an exercise of self-knowledge. To express their anxiety, to express this malaise, they were obliged to know themselves in a way which was not a religious introspection, as in Saint Augustin, and not a philosophical or just moral injunction to naughty Seoton. And I have shown in other papers that in the second half of the 18th century, this kind of knowledge of them, of her or herself, became prominent in the writing of personal writings, but I shall skip perhaps this part of my presentation. You have to believe me. So I would like to tell a word on the first section of my paper on intimacy and conjugality. So you know that during early modern periods, the spouse is an other people, of course, but is a very specific other people. You have this idea of unitas carnis, which is at the basis of the couple, a same flesh, and it's linked to the importance given to the consummation of the union through sexual intercourse in the consensualist conception of marriage. And you know also that the personality of the spouse, the legal personality of the spouse, are mixed in the English common law. It's the couverture. And in France, you have this concept of femme en puissance de mari, which puts the wife under the strict supervision of the husband. So, spouse are others, but a very particular kind of others. So, and you can see that in some treatises like Jacques Chausset, Traité de l'excellence du mariage. Who can doubt that our wives are the most intimate friend that we have, because it's particular kind of intimate friends. So Saint-Simon addresses the topic of his relationship with his own wife, and we find again the idea that between the wife and the husband, there must not have a secret to each other. And I may quote a lot of passages of the same things. So I think that we can see in this example this quite modern concept of a conjugal conversation, marital conversation. So I would like to explore, for ending my presentation, the idea that conjugal conversation forge intimacy between the spouse. My first example will be Joseph François Ignace Labat de Savignac, who is a magistrate, conseiller au Parlement de Bordeaux. He wrote a massive diary covering just 12 years of his life. The colleague who had edited the book told us that Labat de Savignac does not record his personal emotion, his feelings. So again, it's a diary without apparent self, without apparent inner feelings. But I would like to follow just for a short moment his relation to his wife. So in 1709, there is just 36 entries about Madame Labat, Angélique, in 48 pages, speaking of her health, speaking of the couple's social life, problem with servant, shopping, family. So it's not quite personal. It's very information. You have a lot of information, but nothing personal. What is very striking is that Labat followed his wife reproductive cycle very, very closely. On the February 1714, he noted that she had menstruated, and in April, he wrote, I think she's more than a month pregnant. And afterwards, her pregnancy was closely monitored by Labat and with a lot of information. And Angélique Labat given birth to a daughter in December 1714. So what is striking for me, I think she's pregnant. So it's clearly not an information which circulates between the wife and the husband. It is interesting because Labat read a lot about a woman and men reproductive health through the work from Nicolas Venet, Tableau de l'amour conjugal. So we know that he had read the book, and we can see in his diary the passages where the influence of Venet is apparent. My second example, and it will be the last one, is at the end of the 18th century. Is a journal of Marquis de Bombelle and his relation with his wife, Angélique de Macot, Marquise de Bombelle. So, Marc-Marie de Bombelle, his diary retains a great deal of formality. Again, it's mainly political issue, career, public matters, but his style is more effusive. It's quite normal. It's the end of the 18th century. And his relation with sexuality and intimacy is quite different. We can find a notation in December 1788. He announced a new pregnancy for his wife, and he told us, it is neither for my wife nor for me a great joy that this expectation of for child is mainly for money question. And in this notation, you can see that the exchanges about what the meaning for the couple of a new pregnancy is, the exchanges has been present, and that a kind of intimacy as circulation of information is more present than in Labat de Savignac diary. So is the concept of marital conversation relevant for the early modern period? And if it is, what are the consequences? I think that we can show through the diary that sexuality in itself, it's not in all cases an intimate topic, but intimacy as knowledge through marital conversation is, and obviously I have to gather more material on this point. So to conclude, 3 points. I think that studies on the question of intimacy often convey, and I remind that myself, that the idea of intimacy is not a well-defined notion. But I think that I show that studying together meanings given to intimate in dictionary and in personal writings shows the coherence, on the contrary, the coherence of this notion as soon as it is situated in a precise cultural context. Second point, I would like to pursue the idea that intimacy is above all a kind of knowledge. Intimacy does not come automatically, mechanically with body, illness, sexuality, space. Intimacy is a kind of knowledge, a circulation of information. It is a common point with all the meanings of the word. And it is especially obvious for intimacy as knowledge of others, intimacy as knowledge of the self. And I think that the point of the intimacy inside the couple is a very important one, because I think that a lot of action generally linked with a broad process of individualization, so linked to the individual, could be related perhaps more to the couple than to the individual. So, merci de votre attention. Thank you for your attention. And I will not speak in Polish, but thanks a lot.